Hello, Dragon Ball Super family. I'm Legends of Team Foe x PPG, and I'm bringing you my second place Invoker deck list from this weekend's first ever PPG Houston pre-ban list. Speaking of which, a huge shout out to Lotus Gaming Shop for such a beautiful setup and fluid event. The one word that perfectly describes this past weekend is atmosphere. Lotus Gaming Shop set the new bar on how event venues should be set up. They created such an invigorating setting through their stream setup, music choices, and capability to provide comfort. It's obvious that this event organizer is going to be a future mainstay on the circuit. On to my event experience. PPG Houston was a 75 plus man event, and my rounds in order were Invoker, Invoker again, Majin Vegeta, Mech and Frieza, King Piccolo, Dark Broly, VJX, once we're in top 16, Blue Baby, VJX again, and then finally Blue Baby again. Since I've done one or two Invoker deck profiles already, I'll try to do this one in a different format as the main deck is exactly the same as the previous deck list from the G Series event last weekend. You'll notice that there are 5 stacks on the table next to me, plus 1 leader. From the leader to the face down stack will be opening mulligan, your multicolor cards, your defense, your game enters, and the side deck. The side deck, and specifically how I decide on what to side deck, will be what I spend the majority of time on in this video. If you want a more in-depth deck profile, I refer you to the video posted last weekend from the G Series event. Let's dive right in. So if you don't know yet, this is the Ultra Instinct Son Goku Limit Surpass leader. For our opening mulligans, you always want to find a Tournament of Power Arena in your hand. So we do play a full swath of them. We do not play the Whis because we don't want to tap one just to play it to go find the top and then have to tap another blue to play it next turn. The tempo loss is actually incredibly enormous. So like if we didn't find top on T1, we wouldn't be able to charge mono blue twice on T2, so we wouldn't even be able to play this until T3 realistically. So just the top. Looking at multicolor extra cards, we play a full suite of 12. We play 4 copies of Emperor's Death Beams, 4 copies of the soon-to-be Limit 1 Catastrophic Blow, which we'll probably play at 2 or 3 post-ban lists, and 4 copies of Royal Condemnation. Then we have 2 copies of Sleepy Boy. Going to next format, we'll probably play 3 copies of Sleepy Boy, so for future Invoker deck players, I strongly suggest picking up your third foil copy and or stamp copy as soon as possible. Speaking of which, I'm looking for 2 stamp copies myself. Then for our onesies, red-blue cards, we're going to play 1 copy of We're in This Together, 1 copy of Combination Attack, and 1 copy of Instinctive Reprisal. These are all for unique matchup requirements. We're in This Together can help you versus Baby, and Hand Control Combination Attack is really just for Demigra and early game pressure, and Instinctive Reprisal is to remove those true fighting spirits. Going into our defense package, we play only 3 copies of Vegeta. We only want to see him once per game, otherwise we're forced to charge him. The only matchup I could possibly think of where we would want to even see a second copy is probably versus Blue Baby. If they get to resolve a Golden Avenger and you don't happen to have Condemnation in your hand, you didn't prepare for it. We play a full set of Sensu Bean. This card is probably the most useful card in this deck, turning your frontside leader into a 20k, plus allowing you to extend your plays to ridiculous reaches. We also play a full suite of Dimension Magics. Also, I'm not sure if people recognize this by now, but the just in the same way that you can go Apex into an Energy Explosion in pre-format, you can go Apex into Instinct Surpassed. If the Apex gets negated, Instinct Surpassed will still kill your opponent. We play currently 3 copies of Topo and 3 copies of Violent Rays. Depending on how set 14 goes, one of these will go up and the other will go down. I don't think playing 8 copies of the Floodgates together is very good, mainly because Topo is a huge dead draw on the deck. 4 copies of Violent Rays at least can be justified because it is an extra card that you can cycle with your leader. And of course, we play 4 copies of Divine Obliterator Beerus. As we look towards set 14 format version of Invoker, we might play some draw super combos, either the Universe 7 red Goku super combo or the blue Vegeta GT super combo. Then into our game enders, we have 4 copies of Rival Seeker. This will not be changing moving into set 14. 3 copies of Ultra Instinct Son Goku Energy Explosion so that we can burn for 14 life in 1 turn. Next set we will be adding a 4th copy, so we always make sure we have access to it going into turn 5 and 6. Plus it gives us a really good early charge in those in that next format. Plus it's a 10k that we can throw away early because we're going to start teching cards like We Are Universe 7 to pick it back up should we need to. This card also at 4 copies will allow us to burn for 5 next next format as well. And then, of course, the only SCR worth playing in the deck is, let me take that back because that comes off pretty toxically, but the best SCR for the deck, definitely because of Majin Buu, the Unison, we are going to play Son Goku and Vegeta, Apex of Power, and next set we probably will play a second SCR in Fu Shrouded of Mystery. That way we can play Son Goku, Vegeta, Apex of Power, or we can resolve Instinct Surpass, defend for a turn, and then slam down Fu Shrouded of Mystery and still end the game out in an uninteractive way. So as a brief overview of the same exact deck I played last weekend at Jacksonville, I definitely decided last weekend that that deck was the way to go. That list just felt super strong for the closing out of this format. There were no new decks that really popped up that made me feel like I had to add new cards to the deck. Any losses that I took throughout this tournament were definitely just of my own volition. I could definitely always play better, and that's the great thing about card games, right? Like every loss you take, as long as you learn, you never really lose. So going into the side deck for this weekend, we still have some old staples like we're in this together for hand control. Broly Crowns of Retribution to take out Baby and Blue Yellow Mecha Frieza so you can hit those Zamasus. Two copies of Beerus Ball to make sure you can hit those green decks, and if you're good at the game, you'll actually use them when your opponent Android 17 so you get the 5k extra boost, even though it doesn't affect the turning the tide otherwise. One extra copy of Instinctive Reprisal is an extra multicolored negate that you can pick up, and so that you can get rid of those true fighting spirits in more flavor. And an extra copy of Topo for those go wide decks. Speaking of those go wide decks, though, for the go wide decks that would decide in Koitsukai versus you, you definitely don't want to put in that fourth copy of Topo. There's actually a lot of mind games you can use if you know that your opponent's hiding Koitsukai or main Koitsukai. You can take out Topos and bring in Unending Awakenings or Violent Rays. You can kind of just you kind of have to just play around your opponent. And if you think your opponent knows that is going to try to outsmart you, you keep a Topo in or so forth. But I wouldn't rely too heavily on just Topo unless you for sure know they're not going to be playing Koitsukais. Play an extra copy of Violent Rays for those super go tall decks, which every single mono black deck seems to be doing nowadays. So Violent Rays definitely comes in versus all of those. Of course, you have the old perpetrated Dark Broly. You have Red Broly that this comes in for. Violent Rays definitely a card you still want to own a full playset of if you continue to play Red in general, but specifically if you want to play Invoker. We play, and then of course our baby floodgate, which I call is two copies of Unending Awakening. Just like Senzu Bean, this will also turn your leader into a 20k front side effectively. This effectively floodgates a lot of these go wide decks that just rely on 50k, specifically like King Vegeta early game. You can slam this card down, and King Vegeta suddenly has a hard time getting your leader down to 4, which is exactly what you want to do against that deck. You don't want to let them awaken and kill you on T1. So Unending Awakening probably goes up in deck or a side deck count, or even a main deck count if King Vegeta becomes super dominant next format. We'll quickly talk about this card real quick, which will only be here for this format, or depending on how relevant Yellow and Son Goku Absolute Annihilation is next set. Son Goku in close quarters, really great card versus Mecha Frieza. You might be asking why would we choose to play this over Kaioken? You're like, man, Kaioken's a 0 for 5k and it's red. One of the problems with Super Saiyan Blue Kaioken Concentrated Destruction is that it's an activate main skill. The fact that it's an activate main skill means you have to go into your turn 3 or your turn 4, depending if you're on the draw or the play, and then spend 2 of your energy on your turn to take out that Annihilation, meaning you can't do anything else with your turn, and then next turn they just slam another Annihilator. So that just locks you out of the game. Whereas if you have Son Goku in close quarters, when your opponent plays it on their turn and continues to attack, you can Beerus out of the damage and then sparking a D-Magic into Son Goku in close quarters and snipe the Annihilator or Annihilation on their turn. That way when it goes back into your turn, you have full range of what you want to do with your energy. And then if they choose to develop another Annihilation, now you actually have a pre-developed Vegeta, and they had to have seen that second Annihilation. Then you can start taking out with like Death Beams and etc. So Son Goku in close quarters is definitely a strong card in that matchup, but like I said, this is very reliant on the prevalence of Yellow to see if we can continue to decide it going forward. And then one copy of Unexpected Turn. I had predicted that going into this event, since we were going to have a day 1 pre-ban list and a day 2 post-ban list event, I figured people would just bring the same deck for both. So with that assumption, I assumed a lot of the decks that I would be facing would be Red Broly based. Ironically, I didn't face a single Red Broly, and Unexpected Turn definitely helps you out in that matchup if they have forgotten to play around this card. It ironically helped me in the Baby matchup because Baby can go really wide when you're trying to swing into their leader and force them to develop battle cards. So that was a neat little interaction for me. Um, Otherwise, this card has very niche uses. If you've never interacted with the card before, I definitely would suggest you read it once or twice. Its wording gets confusing to some people for sure. And then our answer to King Cold, we have Clash of the Masked Warriors. It's an activate battle. You can remove a counter from a unison for your opponent's unison, or rather, you give your opponent the choice. They either remove a counter from their unison, which would revert their triple striker back down to a single strike, or you can take no damage for their unisons from the rest of the turn. This also comes in handy versus VJX. This deck's ability to not effectively tap out between Divine Obliterators and your Leader's Awaken ability on command allows you to really always have this card as a threat if your opponent decides to go all in. You can kind of bait your opponent into, you use a bunch of your own D magics and Sleepy Boys early, so you really just don't have any negates left. Or you just don't want to show any negates left, and then you sullenly say no negate to one of their big unison attacks, and then you have this card up to blow out the matchup after they dump their whole hand. And then my other respect side card for Mecha Frieza is one copy of Weskai Keeping Watch. It is a blue card, which really helps in case we draw it too early and they just don't seem to be playing Ace. We can always charge it. We can always awaken with it. It is a 0 for 5k combo power, but most importantly, when your opponent attacks with their Mecha Frieza leader on their turn 2 and they combo a Grade 8 Bardock Raider's Warcry for 2 energy, and you cycle with your leader, and then you combo your Weskai, returning their Bardock to their hand, and they did absolutely nothing with their turn 2, and then you get a free turn off of this card. And just for one copy of this card in your hand or in your deck, you bought yourself your entire turn 2 versus the Mecha Frieza deck, which makes that matchup just like disgustingly easier. So this was my side deck for this weekend. I used every single card in this side deck except for Clash of the Masked Warriors. This card actually, I never got to play against King Cold, and the few VJX players I play against, this card never actually showed up in my hand. But every single card I used this weekend, the only card I really hate in this deck is Topo. But if you've followed me for a while now, you know that I'm like the biggest hater of Topo ever. It costs too much mana to play, and it also costs a card out of your hand. That's just ineffective. And then afterwards, it can still be counterplayed. Like, I hate that card. But I did mention how I was going to talk about siding strategies when you're approaching Invoker. And for those who aren't Invoker players but just like to listen to me talk, these are siding strategies you can use for your own decks. First off, for Invoker, when we're looking to side cards, we always start by looking at blue cards, right? We start by looking at blue extra cards, of course. I mean, the order is always extra cards first, then battle cards, and then eventually, if we have to, we can look at unisons. In hindsight, I really should have looked into playing the 4-drop SS Go Tanks Unison. It's like a 4-drop blue Unison that lets you clear uh, Absolute Annihilation while giving you a blocker on a 20k dual attacker. So that I should have looked into playing that card uh, back while Mecha Frieza was a big deal. But it looks like we'll move on from that. But saying that, if yellow becomes big again and Annihilator comes back into the meta, just to prevent like stuff like Baby from playing, then we probably will look at playing that Gohan or that Go Tanks, I think, Unison. But yeah, so like I was saying, we start by looking at all blue cards because we want to be able to charge them turn 1 for top. So that seems pretty obvious. Then, of course, we want to look for red cards because we do play that mediocre color as our secondary color. And then if we absolutely have to, we'll look at black cards. Black cards, obviously, because your leader can't do anything with them. You can't awaken with them. You can't even charge them. So black cards are actually really terrible for this deck. Uh, more so than other decks that are attacking black cards. So if we do have to pick black cards, 99% of the time, we will make sure they're extra cards. So at least our leader can cycle them if we see them out of order or out of place. Otherwise, the only other way to get them out of our hand or make some use out of them is to use them for one of our discard floodgates like Topo or Violent Rays, which of course that scenario can come up, but it's significantly more rare. So we make sure that our black cards are one-ofs. The cards that you can't charge, you just, like if you see 2 copies of the card, it would just ruin the consistency of your deck. We always keep those cards at 1. And that's why you see me run so many one-ofs in my side deck. Like, I definitely never want to see 2 clashes in my hand. Like, you think you might feel safe from the unison, but that card could be something else that'll help you survive the rest of the game. Same idea with Unexpected Turn. Weskai, you only really want to see it for turn 2 or turn 4. When after they slam the Annihilator and they have a bean up. Right? So like Goku in close quarters, you can only resolve 2 at any given point during the game, because at most they'll play 2 Annihilators, so you have 2 Gokus. Right? These are some things you want to think about when you're crafting both your deck and your side deck. I mean, the actual frequency of which you can actually use a card, because you'll find yourself being able to line up your plays a lot more if you know exactly what you could be drawing and what you don't want to see. Like if I already had 2 of these and I saw a third Goku in close quarters, that'll lose me the game, right? Like now I'm down an extra 2 cards, and you're like, damn, that's just one game. But like if you want to consistently win, you got to make sure you're not willing to give up these games for your card choices, right? One game means a lot across the day of a tournament. I mean, that means your mental health. If you lose that game, sometimes people tilt off one game loss. It kind of just demoralizes you. It lets you lose your steam for some people. But more importantly, just not risking that game ends up valuing a lot. So, saying that, Unending Awakening is actually really good at 3 or 4 of, but I just don't have space this time around. The meta is so diverse. So this is definitely a card you can afford to bump up. Plus, at the very worst, it is a one-drop negate, right? It has alternative uses. It's still a red card for Awakening. That's why we look at blue and red cards when we're looking to build our side decks first. um, these are only at 1-ofs because we were already maining the suite. Instinctive Reprisal is a card I used to play at more of too, but well, it's another card you can really only resolve twice a game, generally on turn 2 and maybe again on turn 5. With the format slowing down and like we're trying to survive past 5, we might like you would think, maybe we can resolve another of these late game, but that's just not true. You would just pick it up out of your drop. Instead, you would want another copy of Sleepy Boy, so you can draw more outs and survive on 5 a lot easier. Uh, Same thing with Beerus Ball. You just need to see one of these. That's it's kind of ironic because I say you would only resolve one of these. It's true, but you do want to see one of them. You can't afford versus Green since you can't keep Vegeta out. You can't afford to have this as your last life and then not have if you just play one. So you play the second one to make sure that scenario never comes up. Same with Crown of Retribution. A lot of baby players just keep 2 outs, so you want to make sure you have at least one, and then your leader effect to go in and go for the kill shot. And of course, we already play one. We're in this together in the main, and it's really difficult already for hand control to beat this deck because every card they allow you to choose to discard, you just discard a fetch spell and replace that spell right away. But yeah, this was my 66 card deck, 50 main, 15 side, and 1 leader for the PPG Houston Day 1 pre-ban list event. It actually ended up being a 2-day event. We played Swiss on day 1. Actually, a great event run. Like I said earlier in the video, I definitely would return. And then day 2, we played out Top Cut, and it was just a great time. I had a bunch of really good matches throughout the day. Boy, Texas doesn't play around. But quick shout out to my teammates at Team Foe XPPG and all my friends back at home, both in Miami and Fort Walton Beach, that I get to hang out with and play every time I go out and travel with. Um, yeah, and shout out to the rest of you guys who make this game so much fun to play. I'll catch y'all next time.